I've been working as a commercial cleaner for about a decade now. I know to many it may seem like a weird or undesirable job, but it's actually quite nice. I work overnight. I get to listen to music and podcasts all day long, and I usually don't interact with any of my customers. I go into the buildings, clean, disinfect, and sanitize office buildings. Especially after 2020, our business really ramped up. Sometimes we've even gotten calls to clean up some crime scenes. I can't really go into a lot of details on those, but I wish I could. For the most part, it's just the office buildings. It's pretty simple work, and I enjoy it. But there was a situation that I was unfortunately involved in back in 2021 that has affected me on the job since. We had a relatively new client, a law office, that started a contract with us in late 2020. They had a small suite previously, but since they added a new partner, they needed a bigger place. So, they moved to an old Victorian-style home that had been converted into commercial use. It was surrounded by some nearby stores, all within walking distance in a pretty popular area. Apparently, it was easier for them to hire cleaners rather than having janitorial staff, which made sense. After cleaning the place a few times, there wasn't exactly enough room for a janitor and all the supplies. The clean was simple enough though. We swept or vacuumed. In their case, it was mostly sweeping, as they only had a rug at the entrance and in part of their little break room. We wiped down the tables and counters, cleaned the windows, and then sprayed and sanitized pretty much anything that was touched. Handles, knobs, keyboards, you name it. They had a small lobby or waiting area with a check-in desk, 3 offices, what looked like a meeting room, and then the break room and restrooms. I cleaned the whole place on my own in a matter of a few hours. That night was not supposed to be any different. I got there at about 2 a.m., and it was dark and empty. As I mentioned, the place was old, so it still made its own share of noises from the creaky hardwood floors and a few of the windows shaking. They were actually in the process of replacing them when we started cleaning for them. I remember because one of the repair guys left a pile of shavings under the window. Anyways, I always started from the back and worked my way to the front. That way, all of my supplies were near the door. I popped my headphones on and started working on the break room. It was fairly simple, as nothing had been left out, and the trash was empty too. Once everything else was done, and since that was it for the room, I moved to the meeting room. There was a single filing cabinet with an attached shelf in there that had a stack of various office supplies, pens, notepads, paper clips. The filing cabinet was locked. I just dusted when necessary and wiped down the handles. I did notice the supplies seemed to be strewn about, specifically the notepads and those 10 folders in the metal holder. They were all empty and unused, but they still looked lopsided, like they'd been shifted or bumped really hard. I just straightened them out and moved on. Then I went to the closest office, one of the lawyers. That's when I immediately noticed something was wrong. The desk looked like a mess. Things were scattered around. The small plant that sat on the desk was now on the floor, knocked over. Papers were scattered around on the desk and floor. Every time I had cleaned this place, they had every piece of paper put away unless it was blank, which made sense, right? They probably had a lot of confidential information, and we had to sign clauses too about not going through anything and reporting if anything was out in plain sight. I didn't immediately see anything on the papers, but I still did not believe they would have left their office like that. I continued to look over the room to assess it all when I saw the shorter filing cabinet behind the desk. It had a large dent in the front and top of it, like it had been punched or kicked maybe. I approached it and tried the handle when I noticed with a clunk that it opened. It had obviously been locked. You could see the mechanism sticking out of the side, but with how it had been damaged, it warped that part of the lock so it freely came open. I closed it and looked at the bookshelf on the other side of the wall, where I saw many binders had been pulled out and scattered around. The more I looked at this room, the more I realized that something was not right here. I was not feeling good about this situation, so I left the room, reaching for my phone in my pocket to call it in. The place had most likely been ransacked or robbed, but as I stepped out of the room, I heard the floor creak toward the front of the building. It only creaks when you walk on it. Someone was still there. Before I could react or even unlock my phone, there was a dark shadow to my left and a splitting pain in the side of my head, then nothing but darkness. When I finally came to, I was lying on the ground in the dark. I didn't turn on a lot of lights when I worked. I liked it when it was dim, and besides, I didn't need to turn on every light as I cleaned in that place. I would just turn on the hallway light and the light in the room that I was cleaning. But when I woke up, all of the lights were off. I remember I turned my head, making sure to not make any noise, and looked around the room. I did not see anyone or hear the floors creaking, so I stood up. Thankfully, my phone was still on the ground close to where I fell, and I snatched it up immediately. I was surprised. I'd been out for almost an hour. God knows what could have happened in that time. After assessing the situation and the knot on the side of my head, and no blood, I took off. I left everything in there as is, along with my stuff, and booked it to my car. Thankfully, I always kept my phone and keys on me. Once in my car, I called my boss to tell him what had happened, and then the cops. I sat in my car and watched the place to see if I could see any movement inside or if anyone left, but I never did. I don't know if I was relieved by that or disappointed. The cops showed up pretty quickly, seeing as there was a police station within a short distance. As I was telling them what had happened, I saw my boss and another man approaching. It was apparently one of the lawyers. I started my story over to explain to them what I had witnessed, and the lawyer confirmed the office that I described was his. I was asked to stay outside with my boss while the two cops went in with the lawyer, and while they were gone, I had another officer come over and ask me to give a statement. So, I explained it all to him as well. I remember him asking me to be very specific about the times and what I saw. Once I finished, he patted me down and handcuffed me. I was confused and worried. Why was I being put in handcuffs? He said that I was not being arrested and that it was just for precaution, but I was still confused. I had called it in. I had been attacked. After some time, the cops and the lawyers walked back out. The lawyer looked a bit concerned or frazzled, while the other cop that I had not yet talked to approached me and asked me to go over a few things again. By now, I'm annoyed, confused, and worried, not to mention my head was still killing me. Apparently, a medic had come over and checked on me too, making sure I did not have a concussion. They gave me an ice pack or something, but it still hurt. Their tone was making me increasingly nervous. They weren't treating me like a victim. They were treating me like a suspect. I started second-guessing everything as they questioned me. Did I do something wrong? Something that would make them think that I was the culprit too? The paramedics ended up taking me to the hospital to make sure that I did not have a concussion, but I was still nervous about the whole situation. I know I did not destroy the office, but then I remembered how I did touch the handle with my bare hand. What if they lifted prints and found mine? Would they think it was me the entire time? The more I dwelled on it, the more guilty I felt, even though I knew I did nothing wrong. I was given the rest of that week off per my boss's orders and just waited for someone to show up at my door and arrest me. Instead, I got a call from my boss, and after asking how I was doing, he asked me to come in. I felt physically fine after that first day, so I drove myself. He actually relieved so much of the stress from those past few days. He probably told me more than he was supposed to, but I appreciated it. First, the suspicion of me being involved was completely gone. He had actually backed me up, to not only the cops, but the lawyer too. The lawyer, however, was pretty quick to agree that I had nothing to do with it. In fact, he was pretty confident that it was probably a disgruntled client, or maybe even a defendant, because nothing of monetary value was taken. The computers and other electronics were untouched. It was specifically his office and his files. The other two offices had not been touched either. I was relieved my name was cleared, and I could go back to working, knowing no one would think that I was going through their property. But it was still a crazy thought though, that they would just happen to show up at 2 in the morning, or a little earlier than that even, and I would show up to ruin their plans. The funny thing was, I usually clean their office every other Friday, but they were closed that week for some reason and did not want to pay for a service where there would not be much to do. So they had me come in the next Friday, the Friday that I would not normally go in. It was literally a wrong place, wrong time situation. I continued working, and I even continued cleaning their place. I was just a little more aware of my surroundings. Before I start cleaning, I will walk around to each room and make sure the place is completely empty before I get started. I later learned from my boss that they did catch the guy that broke in, and it was someone that they were suing. Obviously, I do not want to give out names or locations, that would get me into trouble. But basically, they tried to steal the information they had on him to give to his lawyer, but his lawyer reported it, knowing he would not be able to use the information anyways. Apparently, my boss had gotten pretty close to our clients, or maybe he knew them all along. I wasn't entirely sure, but that's my story. I got knocked out while cleaning, and almost accused of robbing the place, but the dude that did it was pretty stupid and got caught anyways, and I kept my job. Let's just say that he better hope that we never meet again. I've had this memory for as long as I can remember. It's not anything that I've obsessed over, but throughout my life, it's occasionally popped into my head when something reminds me of it. B4 or 5-ish. In car with mother, driving around a large city. The large city stands out because I grew up in a really small town. I don't have any memory of the drive to the city, how long it took to get there, the purpose of the trip, etc. Turn up narrow street that goes up a really steep hill. It was broad daylight up until now, but on this street it's twilight. Street has a couple of large houses. Because of how the street goes up the hill and how steep the hill is, houses seem to loom over everything. All the trees on the street have no leaves, just bare branches. This stands out as weird, because I have a vague half memory that it was summer. Street was a dead end. I don't know if that's important. Stands out because there was a no outlet sign. Being a 5-year-old genius, I deduced that this meant that there was no way to plug in anything electrical in any of the houses. When I asked my mother about it, she thought it was hilarious and explained what it really meant. Go up to one of the houses, siding was light blue. Go right in, without knocking or anything. In a dimly lit entryway, with doors leading to rooms on either side, and a hallway towards the back of the house. Woman comes out from somewhere. Mother starts talking to her, don't remember what about. 2 kids, boy and girl, appear from somewhere. I don't know exactly what happened after the kids showed up. The memory jumps ahead to me being alone with them in a large room. In my memory, this was not frightening or anything. Apparently, the 3 of us went to play, while my mother and the other woman were doing whatever. Room is huge, and as dimly lit as the rest of the house. I remember that, even at the time, the lack of light in the house was strange enough that I suspected that my mother had no idea what she was talking about, and there really were no electrical outlets to plug any lamps into. The floor of the room is covered in a sort of model city. There are roads laid out, with model cars and trucks, railroad tracks with a train, etc. All of the streets have model buildings, at least some of which can be opened up, like doll houses, to see inside. There are houses, stores, office buildings, etc. Everything you would need to make a realistic model of a large city. We are playing some sort of kids game with the stuff, pushing the cars along the road, moving little model people, and making up stories about what they are doing, like playing with dolls in a dollhouse, except it's a doll metropolis. I distinctly remember that there was a model McDonald's. You could lift the roof off to see inside, move people around, etc. I don't remember much about the boy that I was playing with, but the girl was really bossy. No, don't do that, do this. No, don't move that person there, move him here, etc. Got super bossy about the McDonald's. I will decide how many people get cheeseburgers. I was annoyed and probably acted like it. Girl moves to a model blue house. Parked in front of the house, there is a model car that was blue, just like my mom's car. It didn't otherwise look anything like my mom's car. Opens up house. There are 2 other woman figurines in it. Girl walks one of the women through the house into a room at the back. Oh look, the woman is coming in. A few seconds later, my mother comes into the room, says it's time to go. We leave, the end. It sounds bizarre now, but at the time, little kid me didn't think that there was anything strange about how it ended. Like I said at the beginning, every so often I'll see something that reminds me of it. I have occasionally asked my mother about it. The earliest that I recall doing so was at about the age of 12, minus the spooky overtones, in various ways. Who was that friend of yours who had a son and a daughter about my age? Do you remember those people who had a room that was filled up with a model city? Who was that woman that lived in a blue house on a hill? We went there one time, and I played with her kids while you talked to her, etc. But she has always insisted that she has no idea what I'm talking about. But one time, I asked her if she remembered the no outlet thing, and she laughed and said that of course she remembers it. I asked her what street it happened on, and she gave me a funny look and said that she had no idea. Be May, about mid-September, west of coast of Scotland, 2008 to 2009. My mate and I decide to camp up the hills behind the village that we stay in. Spend the evening joking about, drinking and smoking. A lifelong friend of ours passed away only a few days before. Quite a shock. Looking out of the land, green fields, the river and the hills beyond. By this time, it has gotten quite dark. Reminiscing about our mate, listening to Leonard Skinner, Freebird, and just as the solo starts, we hear something and turn around. Seen a meteorite, or whatever it was, flying through the air, crashing towards behind the hills where we were camping. Huge flames and smokes trailing this thing, and so close we could hear it. Jumping up and down with joy over how awesome it was. My mate said it was a sign from our friend to say everything is alright. Didn't really fully appreciate the words then, but I do now. Then things get weird. Not long afterwards, we see a helicopter searching about the hills around the area. A very rare sight where we stay, particularly up in the hills. Helicopter does the rounds and disappears after a while. Some time passes. Look out onto the water. See bright light in the sky behind and to the left of us. There it was. Huge triangular, legit UFO. Seemed to appear above where that thing landed. The UFO is huge. Perhaps only a few 100 feet above us. Black on top from what we could tell. Multiple different colored light screens on its underbelly. All sorts of shapes and sizes, with no apparent rhyme, reason, or pattern. The colored light screens would oscillate. A white line would wash over them slowly from one side to the other, none in tandem with each other. Can scarcely believe what is happening. It is dead silent. If you were blind, you wouldn't know it was there. Yeah, no shit. It slowly floats off towards the water, floats over a marina a couple miles away, and this marina would take 5 to 10 minutes to walk the length of. The thing dwarves the marina, still staring in awe as this UFO floats over the hills across the water. Still huge, even though it is now miles away. Don't tell anyone initially, since I know no one will believe us. No one really does. The pics I have used are extremely basic compared to the one we've seen. Definitely black and triangular, if seen from the top though. The section the lights were on was a silver/grey, slightly smaller triangle on the underside of the ship. Each one of those incidents would have been spectacular on their own. The helicopter with the searchlight, less so obviously, but there is no way all three are not related, and does make it seem that the UFO has been made if there was a helicopter out flying, searching for whatever that meteorite was. Triangular UFOs seem quite common in the UK, so I hear, and I know it was fairly late at night, but it was so huge you could see it from miles away. There must be others who've seen it too that night. If anyone has any questions, I will do my best to answer them. Be me with Dad and truck. Dead of winter, near Christmas time. Taking a load from Winnipeg, MB, to Toronto. Load of frozen chickens, if I recall correctly. Most of what you have to drive through is a straight road, until you hit Northern ON. We stop at a Husky truck stop for a bite in Nipigon and check the weather. Huge fucking snowstorm coming. I am around 14 at the time, and have had a bunch of experience co-driving with my dad. At this time, there is no Google or anything. Plus, we are in buttfuck nowhere with no signal as it is. There are two highways, Highway 11 and Highway 17. We have to decide which way we will continue to try to beat the storm, which is coming in from the west. We deliberate over our 7 p.m. dinner, because we have to keep driving and make it where we're going. Our destination is North Bay, then Toronto, with a load we'll pick up after delivering in North Bay. At that time, we had one of those Atlas yellow map books, and were figuring it out that way. We both decide that the storm is going to move south, and although it was a longer route, we could avoid the storm and prevent having to stop on the side, or God forbid jackknife, and end up in the ditch. We choose Highway 11. Boy, were we wrong. About 150 kilometers up the highway, the storm catches up with us. It's such a bad blizzard that you cannot see more than 30 feet in front of you, and the lights of the truck just blind you further. At this point, we are doing 50 kilometers an hour, and we pass another truck who made the wrong decision, maybe once every 30 minutes. We keep going. Road is extremely icy at this point, but my dad keeps it pretty straight, as he has been doing this for 20 years. I am watching very carefully on both sides for elk, because they are fucking stupid and blind. Biggest threat to our trip there, but we could not just stop at that point. We were all in at that point. Still doing around 50 kilometers an hour. And that's when it happened. From what I remember, I yelled, "Dad, deer." He makes a low groaning noise. Makes this unbelievably low angle swerve and just misses these two gigantic elk. There are bottom door windows in the truck. All I remember seeing were the antlers and the eyes of this gigantic beast. The antlers clipped the air cleaner and put a huge dent in it. The elk bucked back, and somehow we did not completely wreck. Air cleaner is pick related. After we both finish our mutual heart attacks, my dad says, "Holy fucking shit." Feeling is mutual, Dad. We keep going at like 30 kilometers an hour at that point, and eventually the storm subsides enough so we can pull over and assess the damage. Just dented the air cleaner. If we hit that thing, we would have been pretty fucked over because there is absolutely no phone signal there, and if we hit it hard enough, the engine would not run and we would be freezing to death. Whatever entity it is that was watching over us that night sure proved it in that moment. We took the long way, thinking it was the safe way, but we heard the storm was even worse on Highway 17, and a couple of people died on the road that night. Safe to say, we made it where we were going. That's the life of trucking. Be me, about a year ago. Staying this summer at home because sister had a bad breakup with meth-addicted crazy. Feeling sort of useless as the summer goes on because sister managed to snag another guy. Then one night, as monsoon season started to pick up, I wake up because dogs start to bark. We live 30 minutes away from the road, behind a few houses, so we are not the closest house to the highway. Whoever is there had a reason to be. No one is awake, so I decide to check. Before I have a chance to, someone starts jiggling the doorknob. I can hear it turning, slowly, then erratically, then slowly again. Get creeped out. Then the knob jiggling turns to soft knocking. Very strange knocking in that it was two knocks in quick succession and then a pause. Get out of bed and walk down the hall to front door. There is a window near the door, but it's raining, so equally dark, so I decide to turn on the porch light. Look out the window. It's my dog standing at the door, leaning on it with its paws. It looks at me and I freak out. I run back up to my room and get my brother's gun, all the while shouting for everyone to wake up. Wake up. I grab the gun and my sister and her boyfriend are coming out of the room. Mother is as well. Dad is still asleep. The dog is here. I tell them, the dog is here. Mom is asking what's wrong. Do I call the police? She asks. Knocking again, more aggressive. I see my dog. Could it be a dog anymore? Knocking. I don't care anymore and aim the gun at the door, hoping to shoot through it. Fire 5 times before I realize the gun has no clip. Rush to the room again and grab clip. Dad is awake. Everyone stares at me as I try putting the clip in the gun. Taps at the window, now. I look up. There is a shadowy figure at the window. Can't see it with lights on. He's holding a stick and I freak out when someone grabs my hand. Another hand grabs me. Soon, my parents and sister wrench the gun from me and hold me down. The figure is gone and the pounding stopped. An hour later, I calm down. Mother is telling a story about the previous day. Sister is talking and calming down her boyfriend, who stood shocked for the most part. Ask where my dog is. Dad answers, outside. Ask who jiggled the doorknob. Everyone looks at me confused. Next morning, muddy prints on the only road to our house, with none headed back. My face went. My psychotic break was not completely unwarranted. Still should have taken my meds though. Seen a few dogman threads the past few days and reminded me of this. Happened 4 years ago, before I was interested in paranormal shit. Only told this to my sister and my mate. Both say I was talking shit. Was on a geography school trip to the Lake District in Yorkshire Dales. First day was Lake District, second was Dales. We stayed overnight in the Dales, a youth hostel in Melham, small village in the middle of nowhere with no real streetlights. Getting dark when we arrive because it is in early February. Teachers escort us to the pub so we can all have soft drinks and relax. About 9 p.m, we head back to the hostel. Pitch black except for the pub light and the torches we carried. Fast forward to 10 p.m. We are all cozied up in beds and sleeping, except for me, because I'm so used to staying up much later. No curtains on window, so I look out into the dark, lit only by the moonlight. Stars look nice, because there is no light pollution. What looks like a sheep walks by, and another. Thought I might be falling asleep, counting sheep. Another walks by but taller and walking on 2 legs. Walking on 2 legs. Shit my pants and retreat back to my bed against the far wall. Can still see outside the window. See another 2-legged sheep walk the same way. Hide under my covers and worry myself to sleep. Next day, we head up the side hill to the top of the curve where the limestone pavement is. If you've seen part 1 of the last Harry Potter, you'll recognize it from when Harry and Hermione dance when Ron is not there. Laughing and joking with my mate about slipping for a grike when I see a sheep laying down at the side of the limestone pavement. It's fucking dead. Insides hanging out and everything, fresh as the morning air. Show my mate and tell him what happened last night. Says I'm talking shit. Dismiss it as paranoia and lack of sleep. That's all that happened. Looked up Yorkshire sheep man recently, but got nothing. College trip to Spain. Rooming with a weird quiet guy. Like 10 years older than anyone else in the program. Constantly making up obvious lies about random shit. Super OCD and changes his clothes like 5 times a day. I still go out of my way to be nice to him, as I don't really have a different housing option. One night I wake up incredibly cold. Notice the light of the AC is on. Pull my blankets up to my shoulders and notice that they are stuck at the base of the bed. Yank them harder and the sheets are suddenly ripped off my bed towards my feet, completely frozen in fear. Eventually, I manage to reach over to the bedside lamp and turn it on. Nearly shit my pants when I see the weird guy's head peeking out next to my bedside table. I feel relieved for a second, then pissed off as I realize it was just a dumb prank. He laughs. Want the blankets back? Hand reaches up from the foot of my bed, holding my sheets. Realize that this is impossible unless his arms are like 8 feet long and flip the fuck out. Just completely curling into a ball and staring at the hand with my blankets, heart going about 150 BPM and my head starts to swim. A few minutes later, I pass out. I wake up to an empty room with my sheets nowhere to be seen. End up just paying for a bed in a hostel for the rest of the trip. It feels far safer to sleep in a room with other people than alone. This happened to me a couple of years ago. Nothing else happened afterwards, but I still have trouble sleeping alone.